Hello everybody and welcome to Parks Bros, it's Drew here, and yesterday I was able to finally visit Universal Studios Hollywood for the first time in 2 years and check out all of the incredible construction firsthand for Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift. Now, obviously, there have been some construction updates on the channel as of the past year or so from some great buddies of mine like Jinx Everywhere, but I have not actually personally been to the park since early 2023. So first of all, it was really great to get back to the park in general, and I will have a full vlog of the misadventures of that trip in the next coming days. But I have to say, this is something that absolutely knocked my socks off. Seeing the construction of Hollywood Drift in person, this ride is huge. Genuinely, video does not do it justice. I know that's an overplayed saying, but this ride is massive in comparison to what I thought, even through seeing tons and tons of video and photo. With the moment going over and underneath that starway especially, standing out like the biggest sore thumb ever with how massive that part of the ride truly feels. And when the Scream Tunnels end up going on that part of the ride too, it's going to stand out as an icon of the park, especially from down the hillside. You can see it plain as day. But to actually get into the construction, most of the track work has been completed, as well as most of the supports have gone up, with only a handful of major supports left to be put in. Most of the layout is looking very clear from a viewer's perspective, and that is incredible because we're going to be able to kind of guess how the ride is going to flow into each element as of now. A lot of the exterior theming has begun on the main station building, which in itself is pretty dang big, with of course the main detailing being fake bricks made out of plaster on the exterior, pretty much mirroring that big building that is in Universal Studios Florida for their Fast and Furious Supercharged attraction. And honestly, looking at the construction and where they have some scrims still, I have a feeling that this building is going to be very, very similar on the exterior, with even maybe a similar tower on the side. Now, there are plenty of other spots on this ride that still need to be covered by some sorts of theming if they want to go for that new Universal style, which, since we're up on the upper lot still, we might as well talk about where that transfer track is, where the dual loading station that will be in this ride. As where the transfer platform is, it is a big slab of concrete on top of a couple of concrete pillars floating in the air, and I would assume that will be covered eventually or included in this main building as well. And I would definitely say the track at this point is probably a good 20, 25, maybe even 30 feet above people on the pathway. So the ride really commands its presence, especially across from Hogsmeade. And to be completely honest, from Hogsmeade looking over to the building itself, it does stick out in not a great way. But unfortunately, with Universal Studios Hollywood especially, this park is known to just plop random IPs in different spots right next door to others. I mean, technically, this ride is going to be the bridge between Hogsmeade, Springfield, France, and generic Hollywood backlot. It is kind of in the weirdest spot possible. But I guess that's not saying too much, as downstairs there's Jurassic World right next to Hollywood backlot, right next to The Mummy, and Transformers and Nintendo. It's just all kind of over the place. Something really great to see though on that upper lot especially was the fact that they were starting to install some HVAC, meaning there will be air conditioning in this building, thank goodness. As most of the queue seems to be underneath this building, I'm sure it is going to get really, really hot on those summer days, especially with how many people will be waiting for this ride. So it is great to see some of those systems starting to be built out. Now, something that I actually didn't really know too much about was near Super Silly Funland in the upper lot, there is an outlook point, which I will say gives you some beautiful views of the valley, but also gives you some perfect views of the coaster. Now, this is where I got my first real experience with being able to see most of the track installed and those supports, and just truly how ridiculous this ride is going to be. If this ride was normal and forward-facing, I would already start the campaign to nominate this as a top 5 ride in all of 2026. But the greatest part about this is it will be spinning. And genuinely, the thought of Velocicoaster and Guardians of the Galaxy in Florida having a baby is both 1, horrifying, but also 2, one of the best things I could have ever dreamed up. Seeing that stall, especially in person, and how high above the ground that truly is, and also how whippy it is with its triangular inspired movement, it flipping you from side to side at the same time, it just looks ridiculous. And I think the biggest thing that will be a real surprise for most people is how high it is off the cliffside already, and truly seeing how tall that cliffside is when you're on the ride itself. This moment is going to make you feel like you're almost 250 feet in the air, even if you're only about 120. Just because the ground below you is going to end up being shrunk, there's going to be some forced perspective, I'm sure, while you're upside down that high off the ground and on the side of a cliff. Everything is going to feel so high up in the air, even if you're only 10 feet off the ground. And that's something that I think is really going to make this terrain coaster stand out. But construction-wise, there have been a couple more pieces of track and supports put in since the last couple of weeks. Something that is pretty new to my eyes is that wave turn off this mid-course brake run / launch section, and obviously having those topping out moments of that dive loop and the stall is pretty dang exciting. Now, something we could also spot from this vantage point was the fact that the dive loop on the outer end of the ride has not been installed yet, but the supports have been, and you can see them from plenty of spaces, and it even looks like a new type of Velocicoaster is opening at the park because you get a perfect view of it right behind the Jurassic World sign, which is kind of wild. Speaking of views from the lower lot, let's go ahead and head down the Starway as we get to be completely enveloped in the ride. Plenty of work ongoing. There was a lot of crane movement when we were there. And something that I found really interesting was actually in the valley before the dive loop over the Starway, there seems to be some spaces along the underside of the track waiting for a catwalk install. So it'd be interesting if they're just worried about it valleying there, or if that's going to be a booster section or potentially even a trim. This ride absolutely takes over all of the view of the Starway, though. As you head down, there is nothing but incredible sightlines. And genuinely, next year when this ride opens, I'm probably going to end up spending full days just watching the coaster run and run and run again. Something else that was going on was the clear outlines of potential other retaining walls that will be going in, as there were clear indents in the terrain that were very angular and not at all natural. And part of me even thinks that it might be part of these giant fences or like screen walls that are going up toward the lower end of the ride, and potential sections for that. As with this ride, there is going to be a lot of trying to block the noise that comes from it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and look at something like Incredicoaster at California Adventure, which has tunnels over the launch portions. Realistically, that's to quell the sound and make sure it doesn't escape the park toward other neighbors and other facilities that might be a little angry at loud noises coming from right next door. Now, with Universal in specific, this would be put in more because of the sound stages that are literally just down the way. As I experienced on the studio tour yesterday, they were doing a lot of filming, and there were multiple times where we were told to be quiet, and they turned off all of the audio and video stuff for us on the tour, because when it was on, boy, it echoed like crazy. So obviously, if you want to stop all that noise from echoing and then potentially ruining the sound for plenty of high budget productions, yeah, those scream tunnels and scream walls are an absolute must. But yeah, all I can say is that seeing this ride in person, it really does seem like they went, hey, intimate. So Velocicoaster was a 10 out of 10. Can you go ahead and turn that up to 11? Because this is what we're getting with this ride. At least it seems like, after viewing it in person especially. Like, genuinely, this thing looks ridiculous in all the best ways. And honestly, this is very, very early, as you won't see it in my top 50 for over another year. But genuinely, if it is not in my top 10, I would be pretty shocked. Well, with all that said, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And if you're interested in seeing more videos from Universal Studios Hollywood, I am looking to go more and more, as it is a really enjoyable park to visit, and there are some really top class attractions there. And of course, this construction, and when this ride officially opens, it is absolutely going to be worth it to visit for me. So stay tuned for more from this park in the future. But thank you all so much for watching. Again, it really does mean the world. And until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.